Good morning, everybody. I'm Victor. And when I was invited to give this talk, I was struggling to come up with a title for the talk, and I think it was Kathleen came up with dinosaurs on our doorstep. But then, as I was lying in bed at 2 a.m. this morning, it struck me, inspiration. And so this is the thing that's on the label that you'll see, but the really obvious choice is there's a a dino on my stoop. It was right there this whole time. How did I not see it before? Also, if you need any more damning evidence that AI has gone too far, this is. So there are not only dinosaurs on my stoop, there are dinosaurs on your stoop as well. Where is my? There you go. There are dinosaurs on your stoop as well. And to sort of varying degrees, you will either have true dinosaurs or you will have their ancestors, depending on where you are in the Karoo or where you are in the country. And I'm incredibly fortunate enough to have played around with varying degrees of all of these dinosaurs and their ancestors across the country, and then more recently even internationally as well. So when you start off the Permian, before dinosaurs had evolved, their sort of early small-bodied little ancestors are running around the Karoo rocks of the Beaufort. But as you get into younger and younger rocks, you start finding more and more advanced dinosaurs. And so we're in a great country in that you can sort of pick the evolutionary stage of dinosaur that you're interested in based on which rocks you want to hit. And they very nicely become younger the closer you move to the center of the country. I've got research projects and topics that correspond to all of these arrows over here. These are the main periods of the dinosaur times, the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous, sort of flanked by the Permian, and then all the boring human mammal stuff after the dinosaurs go extinct. That's when life takes a dip in quality for me. I'm living in the best country to do this sort of research. Other countries will have one or two of these central boxes, and they will not have them from a particularly unique or interesting period. The rocks of South Africa always generate unique and interesting fossils that really do help us rewrite many a textbook. So I did my PhD in America, met a lot of American friends. A lot of South Africans were very chuffed that I had an exit strategy because the country's going to the dogs and etc. I'd always left South Africa with the intention of coming back. I was never going to leave permanently. But one thing I kept hearing from people was like, are you sure you want to move back to the Karoo? Like, we want you back in South Africa, but the Karoo. And then every time I get a message from Bruce that looks like this, I know I've made the right decision. So just earlier last week, Bruce forwards me a picture of a complete little reptile preserved in rock, sent into us by a farmer. And that's something you only get to experience by living in the Karoo. You don't get WhatsApps like this in Joburg, I guarantee you. And it's just such an exciting thing. Like, it could be, you see, it's a Monday morning. Most people are complaining about their Mondays, classic Garfield sort of way of life. I get to hatch plans to go and find new fossils. This little hohiki over here is not a dinosaur just yet, but it's so close to becoming a dinosaur. This is the sort of breeding stock that dinosaurs would eventually emerge from. So then we get the WhatsApp. Thank God we rock up to the farmer's house, and it is real. It's not a booby trap for us, and it's just preserved in such exquisite detail. I don't know if you can see it. Let me see if I zoom in. But on this beautiful skull over here, you can see all the tiny little teeth, beautifully preserved in the skull, and even some tiny little teeth that sort of line the palate and the roof of the mouth. Sort of acts as Velcro and keeps food in the mouth while it's trying to swallow stuff down. The universe has a weird way of making sort of dots and things connect. For the longest time, Bruce has been hounding me to study this specimen, the specimen on the right over here, because it's sitting in Bloemfontein. It was donated to the Bloemfontein Museum, but no one studied it. So it's a new species of animal. And just as I started getting excited about studying this, we then received that call from the farmer. And it turns out we have now a second species of this animal that needs to be described and discovered. So it's a brand new species of animal. And plans are currently in works to take this specimen from Bloemfontein to Wits to have it CT scanned, and where I can study its anatomy a lot better. The rock that beautiful little skeleton is in is murderously hard. And if we had to try and attempt to prepare it to reveal that bone with the tools that we have and with how hard that rock is, we would obliterate it. And so modern paleontology really relies a lot on CT scanning, and that way you can sort of keep the specimen preserved but still get the anatomical information. At this point, we're still in the Permian. The ancestors of dinosaurs are nothing exciting at all. They are the ecological equivalents of a little house gecko. They are the snacks for the snacks of ecosystems. But it's only after the therapsids, the group of animals that Bruce and others have popularized, went extinct, that these reptiles could actually sort of take charge of the ecosystem now that all these jobs are vacant that were once held by therapsids. And almost day one in the next period, the Triassic period, things start getting very weird and wacky very, very quickly. This is on a farm called Quarrycorp in the Free State, and it doesn't look like I'm pointing at very much over there. You'll be forgiven for thinking I'm going crazy. But if I sort of zoom in a little bit more, I'm seeing the tip of a lower jaw over there. This isn't. The rhapsid people are very, very spoiled in that the skulls of their animals stay together, but the skulls of dinosaurs and their kin are actually quite weak. And when the animal dies, the skull sort of just explodes, and you really do rely mostly on fragments. So this is just the tip of a lower jaw, but there are already enough features in here that tell us that this is already quite a weird animal. So it's a tip of a lower jaw, and I can see already in the hand sample that there's something weird happening with the teeth. There's like this spongy texture around the teeth, and it looks like nothing else that I've seen before or that is published. I looked at specimens that were in Bruce's collection at Wits and his private collection, with the Wellwood collection, and there's nothing in those collections that looks like this little fragment. And so I just wanted to get a better idea of what I'm working with here. At this point in time, you can't be too picky with what you work on. Everything that you find, no matter how crummy it is going to be important, but you just have to get that extra utility out of it. And so I CT scanned this fragment at Wits, and I could digitally restore some of its missing teeth and even some of the nerves that invade the lower jaw. One thing that you'll see that is particularly weird with this guy is that the teeth don't have roots. The teeth go all the way down to the lower jaw. It's a reptile, and in reptiles you expect them to have replacement teeth. Like, think of crocodiles, right? Crocodiles have constantly replacing teeth. This is a carnivorous animal, a sort of dinosaur precursor, that has open rooted teeth like a rodent. Rodents have incisors that keep growing. This guy had not incisors, but teeth where the incisors would be that are constantly growing and quite weird. The second thing that's interesting about them is that they tend to fan out. Most teeth sit in the jaw quite straight, but this is sort of fanning out. And we already know from the Triassic that we have quite a menagerie of weirdos already. We've got this giant thing over here called Arthrosuchus, which is like a T-Rex crossed with a pit bull. If you saw that head, you're expecting to see it attached to a dinosaur, not this demented SPCA special over here. And that is a popular skull in the collection at Karoo Origins. That's Proterosuchus. And that big hook nose isn't a break or anything like that. That's actually what the animal looks like. And we know that because multiple specimens have been found, and even juveniles have that little hook on the nose. And so it gave it quite a weird visage. But
what size is that animal?
Arthrosuchus, its skull is about that big. So it's like a like a small cow size carnivore. It looks like it shouldn't be. Its head is too big for its body, but here we are. And so this new little thing that I found will probably have a lower jaw that has the teeth sort of splaying out and fanning out anteriorly like that, which just adds another new weird thing to the early Triassic of South Africa, sort of almost right, day one or day two after the biggest mass extinction event, geologically speaking. So this is a scene I painted of what the Triassic in South Africa would have looked like. The Triassic was mostly dominated by things that are more closely related to crocodiles than to dinosaurs, actually. And most of the things in this scene are not dinosaurs. The only dinosaurs in here are the little shadows in the background, but everything else is a crocodile. But at the end of the Triassic, crocodiles and their kin are hit really, really bad. And it's only sort of modern crocodiles and their closest allies that actually survive. But if the extinction at the end of the Triassic didn't happen, we wouldn't have dinosaurs today, and we wouldn't have birds, and we wouldn't have KFC, and you wouldn't hear chirping in the background in the morning when you wake up, and there wouldn't be a cock-a-doodle-doo to annoy you. It's very interesting to think of what our experience would be like in a parallel universe if birds didn't happen, or if dinosaurs didn't become successful, if crocodiles maintained their reign over ecosystems. So we're leaving the Triassic behind, and we're now going into the Jurassic. Dinosaurs come in three flavors. The big, long-necked ones are called sauropods. Then there's the meat-eating dinosaurs like Velociraptor, and they are the animals that would eventually give rise to birds. So birds are dinosaurs. You can't evolve out of your family, unfortunately. And so that's why, for that same reason, we are still therapsids. We are still cynodont therapsids. And then there's a third type of dinosaur called ornithischians, and they are a type of dinosaur that has largely gone a little bit neglected, especially within the rocks of South Africa. Sauropods are quite abundant, and people tend to work on them because they're abundant and they're quite big and charismatic. Theropods are every boy's dream to work on, but they are quite rare. And these ornithischians I find fantastic for a variety of reasons, but I'll spare my gushing for different Stoep stories. But I've sort of begun to focus my research on this third lineage of dinosaurs that hasn't enjoyed much time in the sun. These are all dinosaurs that you would see in a bag of dinosaur toys, or that you would see in a video game or in a movie. But they are all from the late Cretaceous, like right at the end of the dinosaur times. And they are also mostly known from Northern Hemisphere deposits. So think Asia, China, Mongolia, North America. But the really cool thing is that all of these movie star dinosaurs actually have their origins deeply embedded in South Africa. South Africa really was a hotspot for these ornithischian dinosaurs. And so there's a bunch of small little things that scampering around the footsteps of larger dinosaurs during the early Jurassic. But by the closing of the time of the dinosaurs, these little ankle biters would be kicking sauropods out of ecosystems. It's the equivalent of like something a mongoose size thing eventually evolving into a form big enough to outcompete elephants. Just a really cool underdog story. And they're also herbivores. They're not particularly aggressive, but they just win the numbers game. Also, no points for guessing where Lasutosaurus comes from. Top there. In particular, these early ornithischians in South Africa are represented by this animal, Heterodontosaurus, and its closest cousins, Heterodontosaurids. And of the world's diversity of early ornithischians, South Africa has about 90% of them. And so to understand the origins of this group, South Africa is really uniquely poised, and without our record, the whole world wouldn't know where Triceratops came from, sort of thing. And I can be confident in that because this is a research team that we compiled for a recent visit to France, Grenoble, to visit a particle accelerator, but I'll get to that just now. But we're playing it cool over here, but we're all gushing and freaking out inside Not only because we're so excited, but also because the entire world's collection of early Ornithischian dinosaurs is standing behind us, sort of laid out on a table. I can't think of a more delicate table in the world than what this one was at this time. If this table got blown up, that's it. We have no understanding anymore of the origins of these really enigmatic dinosaurs. And it really is just like a rogues gallery of the best, really charismatic dinosaurs. This beautiful specimen on the left was a specimen collected by Dr. Billy de Klerk from the Albany Museum, and has been the specimen that I used to study my honors, and I've got a big soft spot for it, and so it's really cool being able to come back to South Africa and then go and scan this specimen again with an upgraded synchrotron. Okay, so over here you can see the head. You can't see it so well in here, but on the other side of this block you can actually see the neck bones progressing all the way down here. Then you have the chest, and here's the shoulder blade, and then the arm. And unfortunately the hands were lost to the river. They were the thing that sort of blew its cover. So the hands are washed away, but then here's the pelvis, and here's both legs and both little feet. And the feet are so cute. They look like tiny little chicken feet. And we also have a complete tail. We just didn't take the tail with us to Grenoble. It was it would have necessitated a whole extra bag. But speaking of Grenoble, these are the most well-traveled dinosaur fossils in the world, I'm convinced. It's crazy to think of these little dinosaurs being found in the, on a farm in the Eastern Cape, suddenly getting a passport and getting a paid vacation to France. This is the ESRF, the European Synchrotron Radiation Facility, and it's nestled in the Alps. And so when you leave the office, you are just surrounded by gorgeous mountains, and if you're there in winter, there's snow, and if you're there in summer, it's scorching hot, but still lovely. And that giant donut that you see on this island that's being bifurcated, or that has rivers flowing on either side of it, that is a particle accelerator. I'm going to go on a tangent, and I mean that literally. All of these beam lines, all of these little notches along this circle are what we would in maths call a tangent. They're just a line connecting, or that is incidental on a circle. And each of those little notches represents a different experimental setup. Electrons are whirling around this big donut that it's about, I think it's 850 meters in diameter. It's close to a kilometer in diameter. And these electrons are spinning close to the speed of light. And that produces incredibly powerful X-rays that all of these different facilities that are around this tunnel can harness and use for various experiments. Not all of these beam lines or these offices are for fossils. It's only one or two. Incredible work is done here. There are some machines in here that try and recreate the conditions at the center of the Earth. So they will you put in a tiny little sample of rocks, and it will subject those rocks to incredible temperatures and pressures, so that we have a simulation, or not even a simulation, a sort of like actual idea of what is happening in the mantle close towards the crust. Also, another fun one is that they also X-ray scan ice cream to look at individual ice cream crystals to find out which ice cream crystal shape gives you the best mouthfeel and best flavor. And it's like the Willy Wonka sort of stuff. It's quite remarkable. And dinosaurs and ice cream in the same place. I mean, pinch me, I'm dreaming. So I'm going to take you on a very quick, just a very brief walk through the synchrotron. It really feels like the never-ending story, in that you could really keep going around and around and around this thing. If you have an access badge that opens all the gates, then you could be locked in here forever. It really is the Minotaur's maze in some way. But as you keep walking through there, your curiosity will eventually get the better of you, especially when there are, gorgeous red doors just begging for your attention. I'm not an engineer or a mathematician or a physicist at all, but I just couldn't help but poke my head into here. And you just see some of the wildest equipment, and it looks like something out of a sci-fi movie. And you have no idea what it does, but it looks awesome. And then some just look like a giant bird's nest, and they look like a kidney stone of a transformer. I have no idea what that is doing. Nothing in the slightest. But it freaks me out that there are people that can look at that and do know what's going on there. I don't know how I'm the same species as them. And then you'll walk around the facility again and you'll find something that looks like this. It's wild that me being an enthusiast of things that are dead in the dirt has me walking around facilities and allow me to see things like this that I would never have dreamed of seeing. This is basically a tiny subsection of that big ring that is accelerating electrons. And so the electrons are actually passing right through here, and they are finer than a rabbit's hair. They are really, really delicate. And those are all electromagnets keeping the electrons in line and keeping them spinning and keeping them going. I'm doing my best impression of a physicist in explaining this to you. I am way in over my head with any of the engineering stuff. But there are some things that I just marvel at. There's this entire room dedicated to Lord knows what this is. But to give you some idea of scale, like a human is going to be about that big. This is a multi-ton machine, and it's too heavy to move around on wheels. And so what they actually do is they have those little blue feet shoot out a tiny little puff of air. And so this thing is hovering over a tiny little airfoil along the floor. And that's how they can actually move it into position. It's not equipment we use, but it does feel sort of sacrilegious to be dragging this thing over hundreds of ammonites every time it needs to be moved into place. I don't know how the French stay thin, because they just fed us dessert every day for breakfast. It was just sweet croissants, chocolate-loaded croissants, and coffee and banana bread and cake, and it was like, how? Yeah, the synchrotron's really cool. I have no idea what's going on there. It's incredibly awe-inspiring to sort of look at a facility like that and realize this is something that our species is capable of, especially if we work together. The ESRF is based in France, but it's actually a big international collaboration. And it's a scientific collaboration on steroids, and it's really empowering and really motivating to see something like that. And furthermore, it can give you incredible results into some fossils. Let me see if I can get this video playing. There we go. But that specimen that I showed you earlier that was divided into all these blocks was the largest dinosaur ever scanned in this particle accelerator. And we can now digitally extract the fossil from the rock by using these really high-powered X-rays. When I first worked on this specimen, I was interested in some anatomy that we hadn't found before in the skeleton behind the head, particularly in the chest region. Those little purple paddles are unheard of before, and those little yellow bits, those little hundreds and thousands, are another feature that we weren't expecting to find in this dinosaur. And it's something that could only be revealed by using CT scanning. If we used traditional methods of preparation, we would have obliterated all of that fine anatomy and that fine detail, and that would have just become another Heterodontosaurus specimen. It wouldn't become a specimen that has really changed the way we think about dinosaur biology. There's a whole different other Stoep stories, and I'm not going to bore you to tears on that one. But suffice to say, this is an incredibly important specimen. Damn it, that you hit him in the PowerPoint ruins your punchline. Yeah, so I made this artwork for the press release for this research paper, and one journalist picked it up. I had no idea how else to relay the concept of breathing in dinosaurs, other than sort of, it's waking up at dawn, it's taking its first morning deep breath, and it's making a call or something, and a journalist reckons this guy was hitting a bong or vaping instead. So totally misjudged my artwork. But the skull that I pointed to earlier was rescanned this year, a few weeks ago, and we needed to use some very fancy equipment for that. There's no day when you in this facility that it doesn't feel like a sci-fi movie. Everything that you see in an Avengers movie with Iron Man changing suits and all of that, it happens here, but with fossils and laser beams and X-rays. It's the most awesome place in the world. It's really, really cool. But right now, we are bringing up a special stage to mount a very heavy specimen. And that is that skull, and it's being surrounded by really thick aluminium beads to help with the X-ray process. And that's just Vincent getting the crane ready to mount the specimen onto that specialized base that I showed. So the things have been scanned, but we haven't reconstructed all of the data yet, and so we haven't been able to process and reveal anything yet. It's been less than a month since I was there. But some preliminary insights into what we scanned. We scanned a lower jaw of a new dinosaur from the Northern Cape, and you're looking at a cross section. If the jaw, imagine it's sort of looking at you like a crocodile. So you've got like a long jaw like this. You're looking at two slices taken in the short axis. And these big gaps over here, these little black triangles, are all teeth. The dentine had eroded away, and so it's left this air pocket surrounded by enamel. But inside of this tooth, which is like a sort of hollow Kinder Surprise thing, it's got geodes growing inside of its teeth. And we can also look at the individual bone cells that contribute to the tooth attaching and embedding into the jaw. And over here we can see that the teeth in this section are replacing. Because it's a reptile, it can constantly replace its teeth. And we see an old tooth going out and a new tooth coming in over there. This on the side here is just a big nutrient foramen where blood vessels and nerves sort of innervated the lower jaw. We were actually really stumped at first when we looked at this, because we thought that this whole thing, this big crust on the side here, was bone. And when you look at the specimen, it looks like bone. And again over here as well. But then after scanning it, we realized this is actually just calcium carbonate. And you can zoom in on this and see individual layers upon layers of calcium carbonate being deposited and growing around the specimen. If you've ever made your own wax candle at a market or something, where you take a wick and you dip it in different bottles of wax, it's a similar principle, but just with calcium and the dinosaur's jaw being the wick in this case. Normally you would just want to prepare that off and reveal the bone. Now we don't have to do that. Now we can actually keep the bone intact and digitally extract the bone itself. But what we also could do is that recently new techniques have been developed in dating these carbonate layers. And we can actually use, this is a very rare instance where you can actually use the fossil itself to date the fossil itself. Normally you rely on the sedimentary rocks above and below the fossil to date it. This will be one of the first times where you can date the dinosaur itself. Then another really fantastic surprise, and I hope this video plays nicely. I just found a crumb in the spoil pile after the preparator had finished preparing the lower jaw. Let's see if this works. And I thought, those little fragments look interesting. Let's just scan it and see what we can find. And so this is something that's the size of my thumb, really. And inside of there is a whole bunch of new bones that you can't see them at all on surface. And if this video works with me, you'll see it looks like it's actually a tiny skull of something in there. What it is, I have no idea, and neither do any of my collaborators. So we're all very, very excited to get the complete data set back and then reconstruct it properly. And then I just want to end off on pretty exciting development. There's been so let me backtrack. Roger Smith, a really famous South African paleontologist, an incredibly hard worker, has identified these ancient volcanic craters that at the time of the dinosaurs had already erupted and cooled down and become hospitable places for things to live. Sort of think of something the size of the Tswaying crater in Pretoria, but think of a whole sort of series or chain of them. So Roger and Mike DeWitt got tipped off to these volcanoes because a farmer that they just happened to bump into said, "Look, I've got bones on my farm. You should come have a look." And expecting to see nothing or like a sort of a rock that it looks like a fossil, they found fossils, but they also found, in particular, dinosaur bones in a part of the world where you're not expecting to find them. You're not expecting to find any fossils. If you look on a geological map, there's nothing about this site at all that will tell you that you are going to be finding fossils there. And it's only because these tiny little volcanic rims and craters have cooled down, and at the time when these dinosaurs were living, could sort of live inside there and produce tiny little pockets of ecosystems through time. This sort of daisy chain of volcanoes was still happening at the time of the dinosaurs. And some sites have dinosaurs that are only known from right at the end of the dinosaur times. And other sites have plant and fish fossils only known from like the right at the beginning of the time after the dinosaurs. We know that the dinosaurs went extinct in a very big and dramatic fashion, but that mark in the geological record is actually only known from the northern hemisphere. The evidence for the dinosaur extinction is completely absent in the southern hemisphere, and this would be the first and only instance of that boundary of dinosaurs and no dinosaurs in the southern hemisphere. It's a really, really unique site, and it's incredibly special. I'll show you some of the plants that we're finding. That's an unblossomed magnolia flower. In some of them, you can actually still see seeds that are fertilized, and they are preserved in 3D, which is quite rare for plant fossils. Otherwise, we also have just an overabundance of plants preserved like this as sort of 2D, two-dimensional red stains on rocks. We have terrestrial plants, we have trees, and we also have a whole swath of really, really thin and thread-like aquatic plants as well. But of course, these plants are being eaten by something. And this is the thigh bone of a new dinosaur that we found at this site. It's quite a big boy, and we have fragments that are even bigger than this yet. They're just not as complete. But we have more than one dinosaur species from this site. We have carnivores and herbivores here. And we also have different ages, and so we can actually reconstruct what the young look like relative to the adults. And just recently, I digitized some of these bones. But these are just a handful of the bones that we have from the site. These are a few neck vertebrae. This is one of the shin bones, and it's all quite big and beautifully, beautifully preserved dinosaurs. Like really, really nice to prepare. The sand just sort of falls off the bone, which is something I'm pretty sure anybody else in South Africa would kill for when it comes to working in old stuff like this. That's my spiel. Yeah.
Victor, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
It's fantastic to be brought into your world of research, searching, discovering, and to be shown how incredibly the new ways of searching, and that you are doing this all the time. So, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
We look forward to the next.
The next update, for sure. Yeah.
You will let us know when that.
I will.
Not a million years, please.
No. Well, you sounds like you're pretty desperate for storytellers, so I'll have to sign up again soon.
Okay. Please help yourself.
Cool. Thank you.